Hey, I'm David Veach, and this is Elevate Your Performance. Today, I want to pick up from the last episode from a couple of weeks ago, where I talked about the birth and growth of iron and steel railroads in the oil industry through the early 1800s, which is evidence of the first industrial revolution. Now, there's no real date for when the revolution occurred, but the biggest enablers of that first industrial revolution were three things: coal-fired furnaces to convert iron ore to finished metals, the steam engine and steam-powered equipment, and Eli Whitney's milling machine, which enabled the American system of manufacturing. That's where machines would produce parts in volume to be assembled into products sometime later. Now, in the last decades of the 19th century, three more technological advances fueled a second industrial revolution. They were the completion of modern transportation and communication networks, electricity being broadly available, and the scientific method. Modern communication networks began with Samuel Morse and his invention of the telegraph in 1837. But it wasn't until 1844 when Congress finally financed the construction of the first telegraph line, which ran from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, that the revolutionary nature of the telegraph was really realized. But within 10 years, 23,000 miles of cable crisscrossed the country. And as railroads expanded westward and eastward from California, the telegraph went right along with it. Now, in 1856, the development of the Bessemer process for making steel dramatically reduced the time, energy, and money required for making steel. Since steel lasts longer and is much harder than iron, it became the substance of choice for making railroads on this big expansion. So from 1864 to the end of the century, Bessemer converters produced millions of tons of steel rails as the nation expanded westward. And that expanding steel market, driven by the demand for railroads, like I said, led to the more efficient production methods and to the discovery of new deposits of coal and iron ore, and that dramatically reduced prices. In 1880, Andrew Carnegie's companies could produce a ton of steel for about $67. By the turn of the century, a ton of steel was only $17. Steel mills ultimately exceeded 10 million tons annually. J.P. Morgan, Elbert Gray, and Charles Schwab built U.S. Steel, the U.S. Steel Corporation, into the largest industrial enterprise on earth. It was the first billion-dollar company. The discovery of new oil reserves and efficient refining methods reduced the cost of producing a gallon of kerosene from 54 cents to less than half a cent. The deployment of electrical power generation provided much more flexible power source to businesses, though, than steam. Factories had relied on kerosene lamps as well for illumination. With Edison's perfecting of the incandescent light bulb, factories began converting to electricity and adding better illumination, achieving higher production rates both day and night along the way. Now, electricity provided the power behind exciting developments in chemistry and metallurgy as well, which were integrated into manufacturing operations. Engineering emerged as a dominant skill for manufacturing companies as they began to apply the scientific method or controlled experimentation to solving problems with processes and products. Companies operated with higher levels of capital equipment and relatively low labor rates, which resulted in economies of scale and lower unit costs. But sustaining those lower costs required operation of that equipment at near full capacity. That caused a strain on resources, and that strain on resources gave birth to the science of management and to mass production systems. And these developments were put to use in two new industries born from the desire of Americans to have more control over getting around. And as the railroads, the telegraph, the steamship, and long-distance cable networks brought people together, the turn of the century witnessed the birth of both the automobile industry and the aviation industry. And we'll talk about those a little bit more next time. So have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.